The door slammed shut behind us with a finality that cracked something deep inside me. I stood frozen on the front porch, holding Noah tight against my coat, his small arms wrapped around my waist, his voice trembling. "Mommy, I'm cold." I couldn't feel my face, not from the February wind biting at my cheeks, but from shock. Just minutes ago, we were returning from Vivian's funeral. I had buried the woman who had lived under the same roof with me for 10 years. And now, my husband, Daniel, had thrown us out into the snow like we were strangers, like we were garbage. I turned around slowly, my gaze locking on the heavy oak door of the house that used to be mine. I could hear the bolt sliding into place, deliberate and loud. It was like listening to the sound of a verdict being delivered. Guilty, without trial. We had lived in that Cleveland house for a decade. A 2-story colonial with white window frames and creaky floorboards that once felt like home. I had cooked countless meals in that kitchen, kissed Daniel in the hallway, rocked our son to sleep upstairs, and now I stood outside with nothing but the clothes on my back and a child shivering in a funeral jacket. Noah looked up at me, his eyes wide and confused. He looked so much like Daniel it made my stomach twist. "Why did Daddy lock us out?" he whispered. I couldn't answer. Because how do you explain betrayal to a 7-year-old? How do you make sense of something you don't understand yourself? It happened so fast. Too fast. One moment we were at the cemetery, Daniel holding my hand so tightly during the eulogy that it hurt. The next, we were home and his grief twisted into rage. He screamed things I'd never imagined he'd think, let alone say. "You killed her," he shouted, "with your selfishness, your coldness. She saw right through you, Elise, and I was blind." Then he yanked my coat off the rack, shoved it into my arms, and grabbed Noah by the wrist. I begged, not in front of our son, not like this, but he didn't hear me, or didn't care. "Get out," he spat. "You'll get your things later. I don't want to see you again." Now here we were, in 15-degree weather, no money in my pocket, no working phone. Because of course I hadn't thought to charge it. All I'd done this morning was try to be a good daughter-in-law, a respectful wife, a steady mother. I held my son tighter, trying to shield him from the wind that whipped around us like punishment. My lips were going numb, and my fingers barely moved. "We'll figure this out," I whispered into Noah's hair. "Mommy's got you. We'll figure this out." I reached into my coat pocket for habit, searching for my phone, and instead my hand brushed against something cold. Metal. I pulled it out and stared. A key. Not from our front door. Not from any drawer or cabinet I knew. It had an ornate head, old-fashioned, like something out of a Victorian jewelry box. I blinked. Where had this come from? I hadn't seen it before. I hadn't put it there. My mind scrambled for answers, but came up with nothing. Not now. Not here. I shoved it back into my pocket and focused on Noah's chapped face. We had to move. Standing here would only freeze us. "Do you remember Aunt Monica?" I asked him gently. "She has that fat orange cat, remember?" Noah nodded slowly. "Barley." "Barley," I said with a smile that barely lifted my frozen lips. "We're going to her place. It's far, but we can take the bus." Monica was my best friend in college. We had drifted mostly because Vivian never approved of her. She wasn't refined enough. I'd never cared. But over time, her disapproval worked like erosion, slowly grinding me down until I stopped calling Monica, except on birthdays. Still, I hoped she'd understand. She had to. Noah nodded again, still stunned. I reached into my other pocket, pulled out a few crumpled bills, a handful of singles, and one $5 note. "Bus fare. Maybe." "Come on, baby," I said. "Let's find the stop." We walked down the icy sidewalk of the neighborhood I used to call my own. The houses were silent, the street empty. Most people were at work or inside, avoiding the cold. Our boots crunched over salt-stained snow, and I kept glancing back at our house, but the windows stayed dark. No one came out. 15 minutes later, we found the shelter of a bus stop a glass-walled booth with a peeling RTA schedule. A woman already sat inside, bundled in layers, peering at us like we didn't belong. Maybe we didn't. Noah sat next to me, trembling. I pulled him into my arms, wrapped my scarf around both our faces. "The bus will come soon," I told him. "Monica will make tea. And she always has cookies. Remember?" He nodded. Then, after a pause, "Do we still live at home?" I didn't know what to say. Not because I didn't want to lie, but because I didn't know the truth anymore. I stroked his hair and murmured, "For now, we just need to stay warm." As the bus pulled up, creaking and groaning in protest of the cold, I felt the weight of the key pressing into my side again. Strange, unfamiliar, but heavy, like it meant something I wasn't ready to face. The bus rattled and groaned as it pulled away from the stop, its heater barely keeping the icy draft at bay. Noah curled up beside me on the cracked vinyl seat, his breath fogging the window. Outside, the snow-covered streets of Cleveland slid by. Old brick buildings, telephone poles tangled in icicles, empty sidewalks. I kept one arm wrapped around him, trying to lend him whatever warmth I had left. My other hand rested inside my coat pocket, fingers curled around the strange key. It had warmed against my skin, but the unease it stirred hadn't faded. It felt wrong somehow, like something out of place or out of time. Noah was quiet for most of the ride. Too quiet. His little face, usually bright with curiosity, was slack with exhaustion. I could tell he was trying to stay brave, not to cry, not to ask too many questions. But I knew what he was thinking. Why had Daddy yelled? Why had he locked the door? Why were we on a bus to somewhere that wasn't home? I brushed a few flakes of snow from his eyelashes and whispered, "You're being so strong. I'm proud of you, baby." He nodded against my shoulder but said nothing. We rode for 30 minutes, each stop jerking us back into the moment. Each passing minute felt surreal. I kept replaying the morning in my mind like a broken film reel. 1 minute, I was helping Noah button his funeral coat. The next, I was on the porch with frozen fingers and a bruised heart. I tried to anchor myself with something solid, something real. Monica, her apartment, her voice on the other end of the line. Years ago, when I cried about Vivian's passive-aggressive remarks. "You don't owe that woman your soul," she had said. Marriage isn't a hostage situation. The final stop came too soon. I nudged Noah awake and helped him off the bus. The snow had started falling again, soft but relentless. Monica lived in Tremont in a narrow old walk-up with peeling paint and windows that always glowed orange in the evening. Her apartment wasn't fancy. Vivian had once referred to it as bohemian in the bad way, but it had something my house never did. Warmth that didn't come from the thermostat. The walk to her building took 10 minutes, every step a struggle against wind and slush. My boots leaked. Noah's nose was bright red. My hands, numb again, fumbled for the door code. Of course I didn't remember it. Why would I? It had been almost 3 years since I visited in person. Then I spotted the old payphone on the corner, miraculously still functioning. I dug in my pocket for coins, prayed I had enough. I did, barely. Monica answered after 2 rings. Her voice, warm and alert, crackled through the receiver. "Hello." "Monica," I breathed, my lips barely moving. "It's Elise. I need help." There was a pause. No questions. Just a sharp inhale, and then, "What's the code on the door?" Relief hit me so hard I almost dropped the phone. She recited the numbers. "Come up. I'll have tea waiting." The climb up 4 flights of stairs nearly finished me. The elevator had been broken since college. I held Noah's hand tightly, using his small, determined steps to push myself forward. When we reached the landing, Monica was already there, standing in the doorway, arms folded, eyes wide. She hadn't changed much. Short auburn hair, hoodie over pajama pants, no makeup but the kind of glow that came from authenticity. She didn't say anything, just opened her arms and let me fall into them. She didn't ask why I looked like I'd survived a hurricane. Didn't question the funeral clothes or the glassy stare in my eyes. She just helped me out of my coat, took Noah's scarf off gently, and led us into the warmth of her small living room. The heat wrapped around me like a blanket. So did the smell of chamomile and old wood. Barley the cat meowed from his perch on the windowsill and leapt down to sniff Noah's boots. I sat on the couch while Monica poured tea. Noah sat cross-legged on the rug, cradling the warm mug Monica gave him. He sipped slowly, as if the steam could undo the morning. Monica handed me mine and sat across from me, not saying a word until Noah looked sufficiently distracted by Barley's twitching tail. Then, her voice soft, she said, "Tell me everything." So I did. The funeral, the door, the scream, the way Daniel's eyes had changed. Grief curdled into hatred. The cold, the bus, the key. I kept my voice low, not wanting Noah to catch the sharp edges of my story. But Monica didn't miss a thing. Her brows drew together. Her hand gripped her mug so tightly the knuckles went white. When I finished, she simply said, "You're not going back there." I nodded slowly. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. That night, Noah and I curled up on the pull-out couch. He fell asleep within minutes, clutching Barley's toy mouse in one hand. I lay beside him, staring at the ceiling, my body stiff from tension I couldn't shake. I reached into my pocket again and felt the key. Heavy, still warm, still wrong. Why would Vivian have put that in my coat? And when? I turned onto my side, facing Noah's peaceful face. He looked younger asleep, less burdened. I thought of Daniel's face as he slammed the door, and of Vivian's cold gaze at our wedding 10 years ago. That key, that old key, it had to mean something. I just didn't know it yet. But tomorrow I would find out. I had to. Morning came with a dull gray light bleeding through the curtains, the kind that made everything feel suspended in time. I hadn't slept. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the front door slamming shut, heard Daniel's voice echoing in my head, "You killed her." And underneath the grief, the confusion, the exhaustion, was that key. I could still feel the weight of it pressing against my ribs, heavy and deliberate, like it had been waiting for me to notice it. And now I couldn't ignore it any longer. Monica had already left for work. She'd scribbled a note in her usual all-caps handwriting and taped it to the fridge. Toast in the oven. "Don't let Barley eat your bagel. I'll be back by 5. Call if you need anything." Seriously. I smiled for a second, then turned to see Noah still asleep on the pull-out bed, his small body curled in on itself, breathing slow and steady. I tucked the blanket around him and walked toward my coat, hanging limply by the front door. I reached into the pocket and pulled it out again, metal, aged, oddly beautiful. I turned it over in my palm, remembering the intricate floral etching on the head, the slight bend in the shaft like it had been used 1,000 times. And then it came to me, Vivian's desk, the antique secretary she kept in her bedroom. I had never once seen the top drawer open. When I asked about it once, years ago, she'd said with a clipped smile, "Those are personal papers, Elise. Nothing for you to worry about." She never left the key in the lock, never invited me to sit at that desk. Now I was holding the key in my hand, and she was gone. I waited until Noah woke up and gave him a warm breakfast, then told him we needed to go back home for just a moment to pick up a few things. "Daddy won't be there," I said gently, watching his face for signs of fear or hope. He just nodded, chewing slowly. I packed a small bag, checked the time, almost 11 a.m., and prayed Daniel would still be at work. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for the spare set of house keys I hadn't had the chance to return. The bus ride back was quiet. Noah stared out the window, saying nothing. I don't know what he was thinking, but I could feel the shift in his little body, a stiffness, a watchfulness, like he was bracing for something. As the bus neared our street, my chest tightened. I clutched my coat tighter around me. I told myself we'd be in and out. 5 minutes. Grab essentials. Leave. The house stood there, unchanged and yet no longer ours. The snow on the front lawn was still trampled from the funeral. The wreath Monica had left days ago was frozen to the porch rail. No car in the driveway. No movement inside. I tried the key. The door clicked open. Stepping into the foyer felt like crossing into a ghost town. Everything was in its place, the coat rack, the shoe tray, the mirror. But the air was different, empty, watchful. Noah ran upstairs to get his schoolbooks and favorite toys while I moved quickly toward the second floor. I didn't pause. I didn't let myself think. I went straight to Vivian's room. It was as immaculate as ever. Bed perfectly made. Nightstand arranged with her perfume and reading glasses. And there, against the far wall, the dark mahogany secretary with its ornate drawers and brass handles. My pulse quickened. I pulled the key from my coat and knelt. It slid in without resistance. A soft click. The drawer opened. Inside, neatly arranged in a stack, were envelopes, papers, and a single cream-colored letter addressed in Vivian's sharp, old-fashioned script to Elise. My breath caught. I looked at the name again. Not daughter-in-law, not Mrs. Martin, not Zenaida, as she so condescendingly used to say, dragging out my name like it was an accusation. Just Elise. I took the letter, folded, heavy, thick with multiple pages. My heart thundered in my ears. I didn't open it. Not yet. Not there. I stuffed it into my coat pocket, just as I heard footsteps on the stairs. Noah. Mom? Are we done? I turned and nodded. Yeah, let's go. But as we walked down the stairs, the front door creaked open. I froze. Daniel's voice echoed through the house. Elise. I grabbed Noah's hand. My mind raced. The back door. Through the kitchen. Come on, I whispered, tugging him with me. He hesitated. But Daddy later, sweetheart. Now. We made it to the back steps, just as Daniel appeared in the hallway. He didn't shout. He didn't chase. He just stood there, eyes narrowed, voice low. I told you not to come back. I didn't answer. I pushed the door open and stepped into the snow, not looking back. I didn't have the strength. We ran all the way to the bus stop, hearts pounding, breath fogging in the cold. When we finally sat down on the rattling bench, Noah clutched his backpack and asked quietly, why was Daddy mad again? I swallowed hard, because he's confused right now, and sad, but we're safe. That's what matters. My fingers brushed against the folded letter in my pocket. Its weight was different from the key. This wasn't just metal or memory. This was truth. Maybe ugly, maybe cruel, but truth. And once I read it, nothing would ever be the same. I just didn't know if I was ready. That night, after Noah had fallen asleep, curled beside me on Monica's pull-out couch, I sat alone in the kitchen with only the fridge's quiet hum for company. The envelope lay on the table in front of me like a wound that hadn't been touched. I stared at it for what felt like hours. My tea had gone cold. My spine ached from exhaustion, but my fingers wouldn't move to open it. Because what if the letter only confirmed the worst? That Vivian had spent years orchestrating my erasure? That my marriage had never been mine to keep? That love hadn't been enough? The silence was broken by a vibration. My phone lit up. A new message from Daniel. Just 5 words. Don't come back. I'm filing. Then another one, almost immediately. You used us for money. Mom knew it. I should have listened. I blinked. Not from tears, those had dried up days ago, but from disbelief. Used us for money? For 10 years, I had raised our son, taken care of that house, swallowed every insult his mother served in lace and lipstick. And now, after throwing me into the cold, he wanted to claim I was a gold digger? Something snapped. I grabbed the letter, my breath catching as I tore the seal. Inside were several pages of mismatched paper, lined notebook sheets, printer scraps, one written on the back of a grocery list. It was messy, raw, like it had been written in pieces. I read the first line and felt my skin prickle. If you're reading this, Elise, then I've already passed. And it means you found the key I left in your coat pocket. My hands trembled. I know my heart is failing. I felt it for months, tightness in my chest, breath growing short. But there are things I need to say before I go. Things I was too proud to say out loud while I lived. I inhaled sharply. I never liked you. It wasn't written cruelly, just plainly. A fact. From the moment Daniel brought you home, I saw you as a threat. You were young, smart, warm. You loved him with a depth I couldn't give. And he loved you. He lit up when you entered a room. I saw him slipping away from me. So I did what I'd always done to protect what was mine. I controlled, manipulated, whispered things he shouldn't have heard. I made him doubt you, piece by piece. My eyes blurred. I wiped them quickly and kept reading. It started small. She didn't season the soup. She doesn't tuck Noah in right. She's always spending. But I knew what I was doing. I watched his expressions change. I saw suspicion bloom where there had been love. I planted it. I watered it. And I smiled while doing it. I didn't want to hate you, but I hated what you represented. A life I couldn't be part of. A love I'd lost. I dropped the paper, breath catching like it was too big to take in. 10 years. 10 years of confusion, of wondering why Daniel would turn so cold for no reason, why he'd look at me sometimes like I was a stranger. And now I knew. It hadn't come from nowhere. It had come from her. The next page was different, rushed handwriting, ink smudged. I don't know if I'll give this to you while I'm alive. Maybe I'm too much of a coward. Maybe I'll hide it. But if you find it, know this. I don't ask for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just need you to understand. Daniel didn't fall out of love with you. He was led away, step by step, by me. I pressed the pages against my chest, gasping silently. Grief wasn't what I felt. It was fury. Righteous, white-hot fury. Vivian had weaponized love, had poisoned her own son's view of me with precision. And now she was gone, and I was left with the rubble. And then, folded between the last 2 pages, was something new, a name. Lillian Hughes. She knows everything. She was my friend, and the only one who tried to stop me. She lives at 412 Maple Avenue. I stared at the address. Lillian, the woman who used to come by for tea, whose sharp eyes always lingered on me with something I now recognized as pity. She had known. Maybe she still did. And if I wanted to fight for my marriage, or at least my son's future, maybe I needed to talk to her, to gather the whole truth, to hold it up in front of Daniel's face and say, see, you were tricked. You let yourself be tricked. But even as I thought it, I felt the fatigue wrap tighter around my ribs. Did I really want to win him back? Or did I just want him to hurt the way I had? I didn't know. Not yet. What I did know was that Noah needed protection. From the legal threats. From being torn in half between parents. From the legacy of a woman who couldn't bear to be replaced. I folded the letter back into the envelope. It felt heavier now, as if it carried more than ink. I looked across the room at my sleeping son and whispered to no one, I won't let you lose him, too. Not to your father. Not to your grandmother. Not even to me. The call came the next morning, just as I was braiding Noah's hair to distract him from asking more questions. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something in me, some motherly instinct, some gut warning honed by too many sleepless nights, made me pick it up. Is this Elise Martin? The woman asked, her voice sharp with urgency. I'm a nurse at Cleveland Heights Children's Clinic. Your son Noah was brought in by a school aide. High fever, possible pneumonia. We need you to come as soon as possible. I froze. Noah was standing right there in front of me. I blinked. No, not Noah, my Noah. Healthy. Safe. Confused. Then I realized they meant yesterday's visit. The school must have tried calling me, didn't get through, and took him straight to the clinic. And because I wasn't listed as the primary guardian anymore, Not officially, not since Daniel filed the petition. They had called him. My stomach dropped. I was Noah's mother. But on paper, I wasn't enough. I gathered our things quickly, told Monica what happened, and called for a rideshare. The clinic was only 15 minutes away, but each minute dragged like wet concrete. The letter from Vivian burned in my purse. I hadn't shown it to Daniel. Not yet. I didn't know if I ever would. But now I needed him. Or more accurately, Noah did. And I couldn't let my anger, my pride, or even my grief stand in the way of that. When I arrived, I found Noah lying in an observation room, pale and sweating, but awake. His eyes lit up when he saw me. "Mom," he croaked, trying to sit up. I rushed to him, pulling him into my arms. He was warm. Too warm. The nurse came in with a clipboard and a professional smile, already briefing me on his vitals. I tried to focus, to nod in the right places, but my eyes kept drifting to the door, half expecting Daniel to burst in and demand to know what I was doing there. He didn't come. Instead, a nurse informed me calmly that Mr. Martin had already approved transport to the hospital and signed preliminary consent forms. He'd be arriving shortly. Of course he would. 15 minutes later, Daniel stepped into the room, all sharp angles and pressed sleeves, carrying a folder of documents and the expression of someone who'd had years of practice keeping his emotions in a chokehold. He glanced at me only once, then walked to the foot of the bed and gently touched Noah's ankle. "Hey, buddy," he said, voice lower than usual. "You gave us a scare." Noah smiled faintly. "Mom's here, too." Daniel didn't respond to that. We spent the next hour in the same room, orbiting our son, but never acknowledging each other. The doctors came in, ran tests, discussed admitting him overnight. Daniel nodded, took notes, asked questions. I just held Noah's hand. I didn't have the strength to be impressive. I only had the strength to be his mother. Eventually, we were left alone. Daniel stood near the window, looking out at the slushy parking lot. I stood behind him, the letter a weight in my purse, words blistering inside me. Do it now, I told myself. Show him. End this. But when he turned around, I didn't move. He looked exhausted, not just from Noah's condition, but from everything. His eyes, once so soft, were hollow. Not cruel, not angry, just lost. "You can stay tonight," he said abruptly. "I'll talk to the nurses. It's better if he sees you when he wakes up." I blinked. "You're okay with that?" "It's not about me," he muttered. "It's about him." He was right. It was about Noah. That night, in the harsh blue light of the hospital corridor, I watched Daniel fall asleep in a plastic chair beside Noah's bed. His arms were folded, chin tucked into his chest, like a man who'd run out of ways to hold himself together. I sat on the opposite side, the chair biting into my spine, my fingers still gripping the envelope in my lap. I could hand it to him. I could make him read every ugly word. But I didn't, because in that moment I realized something terrifying. Even if he read it, even if he believed it, there was no guarantee he'd come back. No guarantee he'd look at me the same way. Some damage doesn't unbreak. Some cracks, once spidered through a foundation, are just waiting for the next pressure point to collapse the whole thing. I leaned over and kissed Noah's forehead, whispering the same words I'd been whispering for days now. "You're safe. I've got you. We're okay." But this time, I didn't just say it for him. I said it for me. Noah was discharged 3 days later, his pneumonia under control, but his energy still low. Daniel and I took turns staying at the hospital, passing each other like ghosts in the hallway. Polite, functional, mechanical. He didn't bring up the past, and I didn't press. Our only shared priority was Noah. When he finally returned to Monica's apartment with me, quieter than usual but eager to be in his own pajamas again, I felt something shift. Not in him. In me. That night, once he was asleep, I returned to the letter. I hadn't touched it since the hospital. But now, in the stillness of Monica's kitchen, I opened the final pages. The handwriting was different, shaky, blurred, blotched with ink and emotion. Vivian must have written this in her last hours. The paper smelled faintly of perfume and bitterness. I'm writing this because I don't know how much time I have left, it began. Elise, if you're still reading, it means you haven't torn this up. That means something. Maybe that you're stronger than I gave you credit for. Maybe that you deserve to know all of it. I sat down slowly. I lied to Daniel, she wrote. I lied so many times I stopped counting. I told him you were using him, that you were selfish, that you resented me. I told him you flirted with his coworkers, that you talked behind his back, that you were never truly committed to this family. None of it was true. You know that. I know that. But he didn't, because he loved me, and I used that love like a weapon. I couldn't breathe. He defended you at first, said I was imagining things, but I didn't stop. I kept pressing, softly, patiently, planting doubt like seeds. And Daniel, my boy, he wanted peace. He didn't want to choose. So he started pulling away from you, hoping to quiet the noise between us. But it never stopped, because I never let it. The next lines were a confession of sorts. She spoke of her loneliness after her husband's death, her fear of being discarded, of being replaced by a younger woman who smiled too easily and didn't ask for permission to love. You weren't the villain, she wrote, but I needed you to be. Because if Daniel loved you the way he used to love me, then where did that leave me? I read those words over and over again. Where did that leave me? They echoed like a bell in a hollow room. And then at the bottom of the final page, scrawled in handwriting barely legible, he still loves you, Elise. He always has. I just made him forget how to show it. If you want to walk away, I understand. If you want to stay, give him this letter. Let him remember. I stared at that line for a long time. Give him this letter. Let him remember. But could I? Would he believe it? Or would he call it forged, manipulated, a last-ditch effort to save a broken marriage he no longer wanted? The next morning, I called Lillian Hughes. She answered on the second ring. Elise, she said, not surprised. I was wondering when you'd call. I met her in a quiet corner cafe off Maple Avenue. She was dressed in navy wool, her white hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun. She looked exactly as I remembered, sharp-eyed, calm, impossible to read. I read the letter, I said after we sat down. Vivian named you. Lillian nodded. I knew she might. She wrote it in pieces. Read me parts now and then. She was unraveling at the end, finally realizing what she'd done. Why didn't you stop her? I tried, she said, for years. But Vivian wasn't someone you changed. She had to reach her own conclusions. Unfortunately, she reached them too late. I stared into my coffee, unsure what I expected. A magic solution? A script? She destroyed us, I said softly. Daniel and me. Noah's sense of safety. My identity. She was scared, Lillian replied. Scared of being irrelevant. Of dying alone. She made me alone, I snapped. She made him choose. Lillian tilted her head. And what if he didn't? I blinked. What? What if Daniel never truly chose? What if he was just surviving between two fires? What if no one taught him how to say enough to either of you? I wanted to argue, but I couldn't, because she was right. Later that day, Daniel called. Noah had left a toy at the hospital, and Daniel had picked it up. He offered to swing by Monica's to drop it off. I agreed. When he arrived, he barely looked at me, just handed the plastic dinosaur to Noah and stood in the doorway like he was trying to decide whether to speak or vanish. I found the letter, I said, voice steady. He looked up. What letter? From your mother. She left it in the secretary desk. She admitted everything. His face didn't change, but something in his posture did. She said, you still love me, I added. A long pause. Then, I don't know what I feel right now. I can't undo what I've done. I'm not asking you to. Silence stretched between us. You can read it, I said, holding out the envelope. Or not. But I needed you to know the truth wasn't what she told you. He didn't take the letter, but he didn't walk away either. We stood there, two broken people with a child between us, both guilty in different ways, both aching in the same. For now, that was enough. I closed the door slowly behind him and turned to find Noah sitting cross-legged on the floor, playing with his dinosaur. "Is Daddy coming back?" he asked. I sat beside him. "I don't know, sweetheart," I whispered. "But we are," I added. "We're coming back to ourselves." And that's something his grandmother could never destroy. Brandon didn't sit down. He didn't even look me in the eye. He walked into the living room, tossed a manila envelope onto the coffee table, and said, "You might as well stop pretending. This marriage is over. You're a useless wife. I've already signed the papers." For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. That maybe this was some twisted joke, one of those absurd, tone-deaf stunts Brandon thought were funny. But the way he folded his arms, the smirk tugging at one corner of his mouth, the silence that followed, it was real. I didn't say anything. My fingers twitched over the laundry I was folding, his shirts still warm from the dryer. The same shirts I'd washed for years. I looked down at the papers. Divorce. No warning. No conversation. Just a legal declaration that I was now irrelevant. He kept going like he'd rehearsed this. "I'm moving in with Kelsey. She takes care of herself. She actually wants things out of life. You should have seen this coming." Kelsey. The name hit harder than the word divorce. The fitness girl. The one he accidentally followed on Instagram 8 months ago. The one who lived across town and did those meal prep reels with fake lighting and fake eyelashes. That Kelsey. He turned his back on me, walked straight into the bedroom, and came out 10 minutes later with 2 suitcases and his laptop bag. I just sat there, silent, watching, memorizing the sound of his boots on the floor. He unplugged his gaming console, took the new Nespresso I'd bought him last Christmas, and tossed my folded Peloton mat to the side without a word. "I was going to wait until the weekend," he said at the door. "But since you're already snooping through receipts, figured I'd save us both time. Honestly, you'll thank me one day. Maybe this will teach you to grow up." Then he left, just like that. I sat in that silence for a long time, not crying, not yelling, just still. It wasn't until an hour later, when I stood up and the room tilted, that I realized I'd been holding my breath. The man I had built my life around for 15 years just ended our marriage like a canceled gym membership. Cold. Convenient. I walked to the kitchen, opened the junk drawer, and pulled out the receipt I'd found earlier, the one that started all of this. Tiffany and Company. A promise ring. Not for me. God knows he hadn't promised me anything in years. I grabbed my laptop and opened our joint bank account. I don't know what I was expecting, but not this. 6 months of small withdrawals. $300 here, $500 there, each labeled innocuously home maintenance, car repairs, client dinner. But the account balance told the real story. Brandon had been bleeding our savings dry right under my nose. The Peloton he got me for Christmas? He reminded me every week how expensive it was, how I never used it. But the charge wasn't even the full price. He'd split the payments. I found the financing records under his name. We weren't rich. We drove a 2014 Camry and shopped at Kroger. A Tiffany ring? A luxury apartment? Where the hell was that money coming from? And then it hit me. Not just betrayal. Not just another woman. But calculation. He'd planned this. Every late night client dinner. Every 5 a.m. F45 workout. Every snide comment about my leggings or my face cream. It was all part of the exit strategy. I opened the Nest app and scrolled through saved camera clips. He must have forgotten the hallway cam was synced to my phone. 2 weeks ago, while I was out visiting my sister, I watched him come home with her, laughing, holding hands, carrying takeout, in my kitchen. I should have cried then, but all I felt was clarity. He thought I'd fall apart. He had no idea who I really was. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I texted my supervisor and said I needed a mental health day, which wasn't a lie. My hand still trembled every time I touched something that used to be ours. The coffee mugs, the laundry basket, the throw blanket with the snag from our trip to Denver. It all felt foreign, like the home had been hollowed out. Instead of falling apart, I called Natalie. My sister drove over in record time, still in her pajamas, armed with a laptop, a box of bagels, and a look that meant business. She didn't ask what happened. She just said, "Tell me where he hid the money." I handed her the receipts. The Tiffany fake, the hotel bills, the Uber charges too, and from a zip code I'd never visited. She pulled up my accounts, showed me how to filter by transaction type, and we started digging. Turns out Brandon had created a secondary account 3 months ago. The withdrawals weren't random, they were methodical. Every other Thursday, like clockwork. Always just under $500, small enough to slip under a red flag. He labeled them things like AC inspection or security upgrade. I hadn't questioned it. I trusted him. I thought being married meant we were on the same team. God, I hate how naive that sounds now. By noon, Natalie had built a spreadsheet. I stared at the total number at the bottom. $14, $800. Gone. From the account I'd put every one of my paychecks into. From the savings we said we were building for our someday lake house. He'd siphoned it off piece by piece to wine and dine a woman who posted gym selfies with rise and grind captions. I froze the joint credit cards. I didn't even know I could do that until Natalie pulled up a TikTok explaining the steps. Funny how social media could both destroy and rescue your life in the same breath. At 2:13 p.m., my phone buzzed. Brandon. I didn't pick up. At 2:16, another call. By 2:45, I had 6 missed calls and a text that said, "We should talk like adults." Adults? You mean the kind who lie, cheat, and drain accounts behind your back? Natalie said to keep everything. Every voicemail, every email, every petty Venmo note. "You're going to need a paper trail," she said. "Trust me." I started a folder on my desktop, Operation Wake Up Call. Inside it, I dumped screenshots, PDFs, and the Nest Cam footage. One clip showed Brandon and Kelsey in the living room, her sitting where I used to read at night. He was making her coffee in the machine I bought him. My mug, my couch, my blanket. At some point, the rage should have taken over, but it didn't. What I felt was strategy. This wasn't going to be a messy, screaming divorce. No, it was going to be clean, efficient, and unforgettable. By the third day, my phone had logged 19 missed calls and 4 voicemails from Brandon. The first was angry, something about me overreacting and needing to be more mature. The second had more edge. He warned me not to mess with things I didn't understand. The third was oddly calm, like he was trying on empathy but couldn't quite make it fit. By the fourth, he sounded desperate. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I spent the morning doing something I hadn't done in years, taking control of my life without asking for permission. First, I went to the bank, opened a new checking account in my name only. The woman behind the counter was patient and kind, walked me through how to use their app, showed me how to set alerts and link it to a budgeting tool. I smiled when she finished and said, "That's not so hard." Because it wasn't, despite what Brandon always said. "It's not rocket science, Monica." He'd say it with a laugh every time I asked about the bills, or the tax returns, or why our Netflix kept logging in from cities I wasn't in. No, it's not rocket science. It's just that he never wanted me to know. When I got home, I pulled out the stack of unopened mail and started sorting. That's when I found it, an envelope addressed to him, postmarked 6 months ago, from a credit card company I didn't recognize. I opened it. A Capital One account, $3,000 limit nearly maxed out. The charges were all there. Restaurants, gas stations, a few retail stores near Kelsey's place. Planet Fitness. He'd been bragging about his $200 a month F45 membership, posting his Apple Watch stats like he was training for a marathon. But the card showed he was swiping at Planet Fitness regularly. Suddenly, the luxury gym, the Lululemon obsession, the aura of self-discipline, it all cracked. He wasn't building a new life. He was building an illusion. On borrowed money. On lies. That night, I got a Facebook message. It was from Kelsey. I stared at it for a full 2 minutes before clicking. No drama, no insults. Just 5 words. We should probably talk sometime. I left her on read. There was nothing to talk about. She knew he was married. She knew my name. She wasn't some clueless victim. And whatever she thought she'd gain by reaching out now wasn't worth my breath. The next day, I met with my divorce attorney, Erin Delgado. Found her through a local women's support group. She had kind eyes and a no-nonsense voice. I liked her instantly. I handed her the binder Natalie helped me put together. Erin flipped through the pages slowly. Bank statements, account transfers, receipts, the camera screenshots. When she looked up, she didn't speak right away. Then she said, "We need to act fast. This pattern, it's called asset dissipation. He's trying to drain you before the court can freeze anything." I nodded. I didn't need a translation. I just needed a path forward. That night, I sat in my room with a cup of tea and started a new document on my laptop. Things Brandon thought I couldn't do. So far, the list included handle money, set up autopay, track our budget, freeze credit cards, recognize financial abuse, understand taxes, fix the internet router, stand up for myself. I was about to add survive without him, but I didn't, because that part was already happening. The job wasn't glamorous. A small insurance firm in an office park off the highway, fluorescent lights, beige cubicles, and break room coffee that tasted like cardboard. But when I saw the posting online, customer service representative, $16 per hour, full-time, I applied without thinking. I needed income. I needed momentum. On my first day, I wore the only business casual outfit I had left that didn't scream school fundraiser. I packed my lunch. I took the bus because Brandon had driven off with the car we shared. The irony didn't hit me until I stepped off the elevator and saw him. Brandon, in a tailored navy suit he couldn't afford, standing 3 feet from me in the lobby, holding a leather folder and flanked by Kelsey in a cream blouse and 2 high heels for a Tuesday morning. She looked like someone who'd studied Rich Girlfriend on Pinterest. He didn't expect to see me. His jaw locked. His hand twitched. For a split second, I thought he might actually drop the folder. I didn't stop walking. I just smiled, small, tight, and walked right past him like he was a stranger asking for spare change. Kelsey blinked at me like she couldn't place my face. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the 3rd floor. The doors closed. I exhaled. Later that day, my manager Matthew asked if I had experience with Excel. I did not really. But I said yes and stayed up until midnight watching YouTube tutorials on pivot tables and conditional formatting. And here's the twist Brandon never saw coming. While he was out selling overpriced tech to doctors who didn't need it, I was learning how to track every dollar he'd stolen, every restaurant bill, every Venmo transfer to KH with emojis, every hotel charge within walking distance of her gym. I organized it all, color-coded, annotated, time-stamped. A digital case file of his deceit. The next week, Erin, my attorney, called and said she wanted to schedule mediation. Brandon had agreed. Probably thought I was going to cry and beg and plead for crumbs. Instead, I showed up with 3 printed binders. 1 for me, 1 for Erin, and 1 for him. When the mediator asked us to share any financial concerns, Erin slid the folder across the table. Brandon flipped it open, still smug, until he saw what was inside. Bank statements, credit card bills, gym check-ins, camera stills, Peloton login logs with timestamps, messages he thought had disappeared. And then, the cherry on top, a screenshot from our Nest camera. Brandon and Kelsey walking through the front door. Our door, while I was away visiting Natalie. Him kissing her tossing her keys onto my kitchen counter. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. Brandon stared at the page like it might catch fire in his hands. The mediator cleared his throat. Aaron smiled faintly, and I just waited. He stammered, tried to say it was taken out of context, that I didn't understand, that maybe I'd misinterpreted some things. But the thing about evidence is, it doesn't blink. It doesn't stutter. It just sits there and tells the truth. 2 days after mediation, I got another message from Kelsey. But this time it wasn't vague. It was a wall of screenshots, text conversations with Brandon, photos of receipts, and a few Instagram DMs he must have thought were deleted. No greeting. No explanation. Just the message. I thought you deserved to know who he really is. I'm done. She wasn't trying to apologize. She was detonating the bomb from the inside. In the screenshots, Brandon had promised her a car, specifically a white Jeep she'd posted about. Said they'd move into a high-rise downtown, that he was pooling some money for a down payment. I recognized that money. It was mine. It was our savings. Our future. Everything I believed we were building together, sold off lie by lie. He told her I was unhinged, that I couldn't handle basic life tasks, that he felt bad for leaving me, but she'll figure it out. She always does. Or she won't. Either way, I'm done playing babysitter. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I just forwarded the entire folder to Aaron, who responded within minutes. This strengthens our case significantly. Well done. Thank Kelsey. I typed, then deleted it. Meanwhile, Brandon's world was beginning to collapse on its own. First, his company discovered the expense reports, multiple dinners at mid-range restaurants listed as client outreach, hotel rooms marked as off-site meetings. They didn't make a scene. No warning, no HR meetings. They just froze his accounts and fired him via email. He lost his commission. He lost his bonuses. And more importantly, he lost his professional reputation in a city where networking is everything. A few days later, I returned a few items through our joint Amazon account. Gifts he'd purchased for Kelsey, still within the return window. Since the account was under my name, the refunds went straight back to my new card. I didn't tell him, just watched, amused, as he emailed Amazon support asking why his packages were missing. Then came the Tesla, the car he leased last year to look executive. It was parked outside Kelsey's apartment when the repo truck came. I didn't plan to witness it, but life has a sense of timing. I was in the drive-thru at Dunkin' across the street. Saw the tow guy hook the wheels, tilt the car, and pull away. Brandon came running out in gym shorts, yelling at no one in particular. I didn't film it. Didn't need to. Some things are better as memories. At home, I began reclaiming my space. I canceled every streaming account and changed the passwords. Netflix, Hulu, HBO, ESPN+. Each one triggered a notification on Brandon's phone. I watched, sip by sip, as my tea steeped and the Ring cam picked up his increasingly frantic pacing on the porch of the short-term rental he was now calling home. And then Kelsey posted a second TikTok. This one wasn't vague. It was titled, "When Your Boyfriend Turns Out to Be a Fraud." She showed the fake Tiffany ring Brandon gave her, complete with a side-by-side of the website he bought it from and a real one. The views shot up, 50K, 60K, and counting. People in the comments pieced together who he was. Someone tagged his former company. Aaron sent me a one-line email that night. "You don't need revenge when the truth goes viral." And she was right, because I wasn't out for blood. I was out of the cage. The next chapter of his downfall didn't come from me. It came from the people he thought were still on his side. Brandon's sister, Katie, ran into me at Target one afternoon. I was in the storage bin aisle, trying to reorganize my apartment and, by extension, my life. She spotted me first. I braced for awkwardness, but she walked straight over and hugged me. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. I didn't cry. I didn't even speak, just nodded. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. "You should know my parents cut him off." Apparently, after Kelsey's TikTok made its way to his mother's Facebook feed, things escalated. There was a family dinner, an argument. Brandon had been asking them for money, claiming it was for investments. In truth, he was using it to prop up the fantasy he'd been selling Kelsey. Gifts, dinners, little getaways. His father was furious, took back the spare house key, told Brandon to grow up and stop pretending he was someone he wasn't. I thanked Katie, not for the intel, but for the reminder that sometimes people do see through the facade. Eventually, that same week, I logged into our old shared cloud storage, one of the few things I still had access to. I was looking for a photo, something from years ago, maybe a memory that felt like mine again. But what I found instead was a folder labeled miscellaneous, inside dozens of screenshots, messages between Brandon and Kelsey from when they first started seeing each other, chat logs, saved images, and worst of all, plans. Actual plans. When I leave her, we'll move into the 9th Street loft. She won't see it coming. She still thinks I'm just stressed from work. I didn't get angry. I didn't cry. I saved them and sent them to Aaron. "This is making my job extremely easy," she replied. I didn't even have to twist the knife. He'd done that all on his own. The most satisfying part came the following week, when Brandon tried to show up at my workplace. Not with threats. No, this time he wanted to talk. Man to woman, he said in the email he sent to our general inbox. Security never let him pass the lobby. Apparently, the front desk recognized him from the TikTok video. One of the interns joked that he was the guy from the fake ring post. I didn't laugh out loud, but I did save the security footage when they emailed it to me for records, just in case. Later that day, I did something petty. Beautifully, quietly petty. I changed every streaming password we'd ever shared, one by one. With each change, I received a ring notification as Brandon tried logging into Netflix, then Hulu, then ESPN+. The last one came while I was boiling pasta, and I swear I actually giggled. That night, I slept better than I had in months. And the next morning, I woke up early, not because of anxiety, not because of panic, but because the sunlight hit my bedroom just right. I watered my plants. 2 were still alive. 1 had died, but I didn't see it as a failure. I saw it as space for something new. It's been 6 months. 6 months since Brandon threw that envelope on the table and called me useless. 6 months since he walked out the door with his overpriced clothes, his gaming console, and the last shred of respect I had for him. The divorce was finalized last week. No courtroom drama. No teary declarations. Just 2 lawyers, a board notary, and a signature that closed 15 years of my life like the last page of a book I was never meant to finish. Brandon was there, of course. Sat across from me in the same Nordstrom dress shirt he used to brag about, except now it was wrinkled at the collar and a little too tight. His skin looked dull, his eyes tired. The man who once controlled every inch of our life now looked like he hadn't slept properly in weeks. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just signed my name and walked out with my head high. He didn't follow. Later that day, I stopped at the grocery store to pick up a few things, rice pasta, some apples. Nothing fancy. As I walked down the frozen foods aisle, I ran into someone I didn't expect, his mom. She froze when she saw me, a box of lean cuisines in her hand. Then she walked over slowly, like she wasn't sure if I'd slap her or hug her. I didn't do either. We just talked. She told me they'd refused to loan Brandon any more money, that he needed to hit bottom before he could learn anything. Then she looked at my cart, filled with practical, quiet things, and said, "You always were the one who kept him grounded." And then she helped me pick out 2 throw pillows on clearance for my little apartment. That apartment has become my sanctuary. I painted the walls soft green, bought a rug I actually liked, hung photos of places I've never been but hope to see. I've kept the plants alive, well, most of them. I cook now, real food. HelloFresh and YouTube have become my lifelines. I learned to do basic repairs, unclog a drain, change the air filter, and even set up my own Wi-Fi. Turns out, I'm not the helpless idiot Brandon made me believe I was. Go figure. I still work at the insurance office. Got a small raise, a $5 bump. It's not life-changing, but it felt like a victory. Matthew, my manager, still eats lunch with me sometimes. We don't talk about exes. We talk about weekend plans, terrible TV shows, and whether we'd survive in a zombie apocalypse. He makes me laugh. I don't know what that means yet, but it feels good. Brandon still tries to contact me, always through new Instagram accounts, usually late at night. Messages like, "You'll regret this," or "We were meant to be." I just block and move on. Last week, while cleaning out my old files, I found the wedding photos. The ones I swore I'd burned months ago. I looked at that girl in white, standing beside the man who would eventually dismantle her life piece by piece. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel anger. I felt compassion. Not for him. For her. Because she didn't know. She gave everything she had. And now she's gone. In her place is someone who walks taller, speaks clearer, and no longer waits for permission to live. The last time I saw Brandon in person was 2 weeks ago, of all places at Planet Fitness. Yes, the same budget gym he used to mock. The one I go to now on Saturday mornings because it's affordable, and I actually like the routine. I was walking through the parking lot with my headphones in when I saw him getting out of a beat-up Honda, one of those older Civics with a missing hubcap and a bumper sticker half peeled off. It took me a moment to register it was him. He looked smaller. He glanced up, recognized me, and quickly looked away. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. He was no longer the man in the $90 polo shirt who called me useless. Now he was just another guy at a strip mall gym, paying off debt he couldn't hide behind a watch face or cologne. Later that week, I was at Dunkin', same one as before, grabbing my usual iced coffee before work. As I waited for my order, I heard two guys at the table behind me laughing. One of them said, "Remember the guy who faked client dinners? The one who got kicked out of that medical sales job." Then I heard it again. His name, Brandon Carter. Turns out, word travels in small cities, especially when it's layered with scandal and TikTok virality. His name had made the rounds, not in headlines but in whispers, the kind of reputation you don't recover from. He tried to apply back to his old job twice. Showed up in the lobby once. No one even bothered calling security. They just let him stand there until he walked out. He still tries to message me from random Instagram accounts. I block each one without reading. The names change. Be for real. Fresh Start 79, Real Brandon TX, but the desperation doesn't. One day, while organizing old emails, I found a file in our shared Google Drive. A document titled Passwords. He'd kept all of them, banking, streaming, email, on one single file. I didn't do anything with it. I just forwarded it to Katie, his sister. She replied with a single emoji. That was enough. There's no dramatic revenge post coming. No Instagram story exposing every detail. No angry message left on his voicemail. Because he's already destroyed his own legacy. Me, I'm fine. I'm still in that modest studio apartment, still getting by on iced coffee and one-pan dinners. I've got a tiny herb garden on my balcony now. I painted the planter boxes myself. I don't need anyone to fix the sink or tell me which detergent to use or whether the thermostat is set too high. I know who pays the bills. I know how to manage a budget. I know how to set up Wi-Fi and dispute a bank charge and format a spreadsheet. I know how to be alone without being lonely. And that's the part no one ever warned me about. That when you walk through the fire, you don't just come out stronger. You come out whole. Yesterday, I went to deposit my paycheck in person. I like doing that. It feels tangible, like proof. The same teller who helped me open the account 6 months ago was there. She smiled at me and said, "You look happier." And I didn't hesitate. I smiled back. I am.